So I'm here with on the Meaningful Interviews program with Rabbi Mendel Groner, who's a Rosh Yeshiva at the Lubavitch Yeshiva, the Chabad Yeshiva in Kiryat Gat, Eretz Yisrael. He's one of the shluchim of the Rebbe. The Rebbe sent three groups, and one of the groups was in 1978. And he's been there since that time. I remember him still from Yeshiva as an older bacher. And we're talking about uh, his father, who was a maskir, a secretary of the Rebbe, and way from the beginning, and even earlier in a sense. And I want to continue now. Your father was a strong learner, right? I heard that from different people who I've spoken to over the years, and I know that in 1946, I believe, he, together with, I think, Rabbi Rosenfeld, Rabbi Goldman, and several others, they were sent, what they would call today on a Bochurim Shlichus, they were sent to a yeshiva, Lubavitch yeshiva, that opened in Chicago. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know exactly the year. I think it was in Tufshin Hay in 1945. I don't know. I didn't ever look up the date,
Okay,
but there was
okay.
sent several Bachrim about that were sent to Chicago to open up a yeshiva there. Yes, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So, something that I've wondered and others, why did that yeshiva close?
I have no idea. I don't know if it closed. I know they were there for a certain time. It could be it continued. Well, till
Okay,
today, there's a Lubavitch yeshiva in Chicago.
no, mixing up. It's okay. Anyway, it closed, but that's fine. Okay, let's go on. So I want to go. I want to talk about the Rebbe gave out answers. Tzedlach, started. Rabbi Shalom Berlevin says it started in 1968 after Rabbi Rothstein passed away. Uh, the Rebbe started with answering people on their letters, writing notes more in style of a zettel, a note, versus many letters that he had been writing, because they took dictation, they wrote it up, whatever the case. I'm not saying that he cut it out at all. He didn't cut it out at all, but the settler started. So how who got which settler to type up? Do you have any idea?
I don't really know what you're talking about because I think there was Setlach that the Rebbe answered beforehand too. But the Rebbe used to dictate letters. The Rebbe dictated letters to Rabbi Mendel that was mainly in English, also Michtovim Klolim. And the Rebbe also used to dictate letters to Rabbi Rothstein. And the Rebbe used to sign in them, so as the letters of Rabbi Mendel. But you cannot say that the Rebbe never answered any Tzetlach because we do have Ksav Yadin that the Rebbe answered in the previous years. Rabbi Rothstein used to go in almost every day, not every day, because I found in my father's diaries that the Rebbe tells him, tell Rabbi Rothstein to come in today. Tell him I can't today. You should come in another 2 days. So it wasn't every day that he came in, and the Rebbe used to dictate him answers for certain people.
Okay, I understand.
After that stopped, one second. After that stopped, so people, as Lubavitch grew and also the world started to write more and more letters to the Rebbe, and mainly Tzetlach. There were letters that came by mail, air mail. There were letters that came regular mail, and then there were letters that people came into the Rebbe's office and dropped in the box in the corner. There was a box. I think you remember it, like a gray box.
Yeah.
And in that box, they used to put in their notes. Sometimes they would ask the secretaries to write the notes for them. And the years later went on, so faxes started to come. So usually letters that came overseas, the Rebbe would write up a nusach of an answer, and it would be typed as a letter type to be sent off to those that send the letters. Those that gave in setlach, so the Rebbe used to notes. That means the Rebbe used to write the answer on the note, and people used to come and pick up the answer, or they used to go through the call the secretary on the phone. But Then the dictating letters remained only by Rabbi Mendel. And let's say all the Michtovim Klolim that the Rebbe wrote before Pesach, before Yom Tov, those were mostly dictated, and the Rebbe afterwards would look it over and be Magiahid. There was one time that the Rebbe wrote the whole letter by himself, but I remember, and the Rebbe told my father to come to his house, and my father came to the house, and the Rebbe opened the door for him, and the Rebbe smiled, and the Rebbe gave him the letter. It was at night. The Rebbe gave him the letter in his hand, what he wrote himself. We know in the Michtavim Klolim, when there's certain paragraphs, between the paragraphs, there are 3 stars. So when he came home, we were there home, so we looked at the letter, because the letter was handwritten from the top to the end, all in the Rebbe's own handwriting. And I saw that the 3 stars, the Rebbe also made behind handwriting 3 stars. That means it wasn't just that the editor of the letter, like Rabbi Mendel, decided to put 3 stars. Everything was in accordance with what the Rebbe, according to the Kavanah way the Rebbe did. But dictating letters was definitely through Rabbi Mendel. Now, a lot of letters the Rebbe used to give over that the secretary should sign, and the main secretary that signed was Rabbi Shalom Mendel Simpson, Olav Shalom. And there were times that the secretaries, they typed up the letter, and they signed Rabbi Simpson's name. And there were even times that the Rebbe signed Rabbi Simpson's name. There were letters that the Rebbe signed, and there were letters that the Rebbe, the secretaries, even Rabbi Quint, that was one of the secretaries, we stopped and you heard of him.
Yes.
So they're full of letters that it says also Aleph Quint, because he used to also type up letters. I remember him in the office as a young boy. He used to sit and type a lot of the letters for the Rebbe in English and in Hebrew. So actually there was a whole staff that was taking care of the letters, but the answers that the Rebbe gave out on the Tzetlach, that went through mainly through my father and through Rabbi B'Yomen Klein Olav Sholem. And they gave her over the Tzetlach through the telephone usually.
Okay. My question still remains. I didn't have an answer. Maybe asking.
Clarify your question. You're asking a question, but you have to clarify.
In other words, the different secretaries got letters Tetlach from the Rebbe. Who was given who typed up what? Was there a seder, or just was whoever was around?
Usually, my father typed up a lot of answers and letters. Rabbi Quint, Shalom Mendel Simpson.
Right, I know that.
They
I
used
know
to
that. I'm asking was certain type of answers and letters went to your father, certain ones to Rabbi Quint. That's what I'm asking.
I don't really think so, because you can't say certain. I know my father got orders from the Rebbe to type up in these letters. There were letters that the Rebbe told my father type them up. I want them typed up. I find it in the diary the whole time. And I also saw my father. These are letters that the Rebbe gave my father to type up. And it could be that the secretary shared the letters. There was one time that my father got an order from the Rebbe to type up the letter and to bring it back to him. And after a half hour, he came back. So the Rebbe said, that's how long it takes to type. So my father said there were many people in the office that were bothering him. So the Rebbe says, you have to type the letter. You can't occupy yourself with other things. So now you'll have to do the letters, sit in my office, and do your work here, that nobody should bother you. So I cannot tell you what letters the Rebbe said. I don't know if there's order. There's bar mitzvah letters. There were letters that for weddings, letters for children who were born. There were regular answers. There were long letters. There were letters in learning.
Right.
There was a lot of type of letters.
One second. So I heard that the bar mitzvah and wedding and bris letters, all those letters were Rabbi Simpson typed those up. That's what I heard. Is that true?
Yeah, well, I'll ask you a question. What is important to see who typed it and who not, and that? I never thought that it's an important question. The Rebbe's letter had to be typed. The Rebbe's letters had to be typed, and it was typed. That's all. I remember walking into the office. I remember my father typing a lot of letters. I remember other people typing the letters and bringing it. Now, like what happens like this, they used to type up the letters and bring it to the Rebbe. And the letters used to accumulate in the Rebbe's room. When I came to Kiryat Gat, so I was confronted by a certain fellow. He said he just got a letter that the date is 7 months ago. How is it possible that the secretaries held back the letter for 7 months? What's the answer to the question? The letter was typed on that date, but the Rebbe did not sign the letter till 2, 3 months or 4 months afterwards. I remember when my father used to come out from the Rebbe's room with letters that were typed, and the Rebbe just signed them, with so many letters that he was to lock the office. He and Rabbi Klein would lock the office, and they would fold its airmail letters. They would sit and fold the letters and make sure nobody goes in. And then they had hundreds and hundreds of letters that the Rebbe just signed and run off with it to the post office. So we know that there were letters that Rebbe wrote, and the Rebbe, and we also see a lot of times the Rebbe writes Nisakev Hamishtov, and the meanwhile I didn't. That means I didn't send a letter yet. But meanwhile, I got another letter from you. Well, you're acquainted with it. You see this in a lot of the letters that the Rebbe writes Nisakev Hamishtov, that the letter didn't go out in time yet. So I never looked why my father is typing this letter and another secretary is typing this letter. It never took an interest in me, and I don't have an answer for it.
Okay.
And I don't think it's interesting to know that I don't think it's a question that's a major question. Please.
Okay, let's go on. Now, you mentioned earlier that the Tzetlach, you said that your father and the others, they gave the Tzetlach. My experience, and I think I heard from others, is they did not give you the Zettel. And I heard clearly from one of the other secretaries, Shame, that the Rebbe that used to burn. He wanted those burnt, or he threw them into the oil, or he had them burnt in the incinerator instead of 70. So in general, he did not give out those settlach. Am I wrong?
I'll explain to you. I find this also the diary of my father. I remember it too. The Rebbe used to burn a lot of tzedlach that came to the Rebbe considered him as pidyon nefesh. Because the person signed on the letter, he signed his name and his mother's name. Once he signs his name and his mother's name, it turns into pidyon nefesh. A lot of these letters, the Rebbe took to the oil and left it by the oil. A lot of the letters, the Rebbe burnt Erev Pesach together with the chometz. Now, I find in the diary too that the Rebbe asked my father what time exactly is burning chometz time. And the Rebbe would stand by the window and read very fast as many letters upon him that he could. Then he would take it all and they would throw it into the incinerator downstairs in 770. Which setlach the Rebbe took to the oil and which he burnt, that we don't know, and it's not of any of our business. This the Rebbe had his system. What he took to the oil and left, we know by the oil the Rebbe used to read setlach and tear it and leave it there. And there would setlach that the Rebbe would, upon him, that the Rebbe would take and burn in the incinerator. Which ones, this is inyonim that the Rebbe would decide, and it's Rebbe Shigesheft.
Right. Okay.
But this is definitely clear.
You said earlier.
Could you please speak towards the mic because I hear you in the echo. I don't hear you clear. Please speak towards the mic.
Okay. You implied before, if I heard you correctly, that the secretary sometimes gave the tzetlach with the Rebbe's handwriting back to the people. Is that the case?
Never. The Rebbe wanted all the tzetlach with the ksaviyat back to him.
Okay. Now, so my question is, why?
I'll explain. Rabbi Klein gave to Rabbi Yossel Gutnik, as far as I know, he gave him original tzetlach. Why? I don't know. Maybe he had permission. But usually, every zettel that said Asker al Atzion, right? Yes. So the Rebbe wanted it back. Usually the Rebbe would give him an answer and then write Asker al Atzion. So the Rebbe wanted the zettel back, and he would take it to the oil, or he would burn it in Erev Pesach or take it to the oil.
Okay.
And the Rebbe did not want, and the Rebbe said, excuse me, let me finish the sentence. The Rebbe said in Yiddish, ich will nicht, dass meine Ksavyaden sollen sich walgen in the Gassen. I don't want that my Ksavyaden should run around the streets. So the Rebbe wanted every, and another thing that you don't know, every person, every masker that would answer to a person an answer would send back the zettel to the Rebbe and put a V on it and write Hoidati. That means he had to give back the Rebbe the zettel, and he had to write to confirm that he gave over the zettel. So there used to be like a V, and also he used to write Hoidati. So those zettlach came back to most of the zettlach came back to the Rebbe.
Okay, so what? Let me ask you this: why, when a letter the Rebbe let go, the person got the original letter from the Rebbe, but a zettel went back to him. Do you know the difference? Why?
Because the letters that people wrote, the Rebbe Lav Dafka answered on the letter. The Rebbe answered on a separate paper, on a letter the Rebbe wrote. The Rebbe dictated it or wrote it or wrote up the nusach. So those the Rebbe sent out. That means a lot of the letters were dictated, so it wasn't the Rebbe's Ksav Yad, only the Rebbe's signature. But people that sent in letters, the Rebbe did not answer the letters. Only few letters that the Rebbe felt you could give it over through the phone. You don't have to send it back a letter. So on the letter, the Rebbe would put down the answer. But that had to go back to the Rebbe. But usually, letters that people asked questions and the Rebbe answered on a separate letter. The answers, so the letter that the person sent did not have to stay by the Rebbe, unless the Rebbe wrote Ashkelon and he wanted it back. And still we don't know, because we do find a lot of letters, the art setlach that were by the secretaries, that the Rebbe left it by them, and they would setlach the Rebbe wanted back. We don't know the seder for it. I know the marshal that all the answers that my father got about learning, all the questions on learning, those setlach the Rebbe gave him to keep. That means we gave out the 3 books of Bechadri Tzeresecha. Where did we find all these Ksavyaden? We found the originals, not photostats. The original Tzetlach. And those Tzetlach does not say Askelatzian. Those Tzetlach, the Rebbe answers on his questions that he had in learning, and what he had on the Rebbe's Fabrengen. So that stayed by him. There's also private Tzetlach that he wrote to the Rebbe about certain issues, and it seems that the Rebbe gave him, he should hold on to it. But usually, the Seder was the Rebbe wanted all the Tzetlach back. And I remember the people, I remember Binyamin, I remember my father preparing the answers with paper clips and giving it back to the Rebbe.
Okay, that was very good. You clarified. You did say something that I was unaware of, and I just want to make sure that I heard it right, and people want to hear this. You said that what made something a pidyon nefesh is dafka when you wrote your name and your mother's name. Is that correct?
Why did people write their name and the mother's name? Why did they just write their name? Because their name and the mother's name is like a bakoshes bracha. When do you write your name and your mother's name? When you're asking for a bracha.
Yes.
So that was like a pidyon nefesh, because we know a lot of tzetlach that people wrote to the Rebbe, even letters. The Rebbe wrote Hapan Niskabel. And the guy says, I never wrote a pidyon nefesh. I never wrote Ono lo oide rachmim rabim. I just wrote the problem. I wrote, but because he signed his name and his mother's name, so for that, the Rebbe considered it a pidyon nefesh.
That's very interesting. Very interesting. Is this? I'm just curious. Is this your own hasbara, or you heard this from your father?
I heard this from my father.
Thank you.
But it's logic. It's not something that
I know. I understand.
I know that people ask my father, why does it say Hapan Niskabel b'shas he never wrote a pan?
Right.
So my father told me your name, your mother's name.
Right. Okay. Now, you mentioned we're talking. You mentioned that your father started to help the Rebbe with a lot of gashmistic things. That you gave an example of him. With the honey cake on Erev Yom Kippur, bending down instead of the Rebbe doing it, and shmura matzah and Pesach. Would you say that started in Lamed Ches after the Rebbe's Leileinu's heart attack, or that even was beforehand?
There was before also. It depends on the years. As years went on, they try to make for the Rebbe things easier. But especially after Lamed Ches, I asked my father why he started to wear a kapote from Tosh Lamed Ches. to Lamed Ches, if you see the pictures of Fabrengen, he's wearing a short jacket.
Yes.
So he told me that from Lamed Ches, the whole shimush by the Rebbe, by him with the Rebbe, changed drastically. That means he became not only a secretary, he became also a Shamesh, and he had physical help, physical things that he had to do for the Rebbe. So he felt, Marshall, in Tosha Lamed Ches, the Rebbe wasn't able to put on tefillin alone because the Rebbe was connected to IV, and the Rebbe was his right hand was IV, and also the Rebbe wasn't up to it because he was weakish. So who put on tefillin on the Rebbe? My father. So he says, I have a personal shimish with the Rebbe. He put on tefillin on the Rebbe, the Shalyad and the Shalrosh. And he put on also the talis, etc. And he took off the Rebbe's tefillin. And that's where actually it happened, more of a physical shimush, as we call, as a servant, not only a maskim. Even though before that there were also certain things. The marshal, when the Rebbe used to go with the oil, Tul Toshin Zion, my father and Rebbe Chadikov and Rebbe Osher Karzanovsky went along with the Rebbe. My father used to stand and hold the
Wait,
bag of.
wait. Not
Let me
Osher
finish the sentence.
No, you made a mistake. Osher Kazanovsky or Shlomo Aaron Kazanovsky?
Rabbi Aaron Karzanovsky, not Osher. Rabbi Aaron Karzanovsky, Tul Toshin Yud Zion.
Yes.
Tul Toshi Zayin, and Toshi Zayin, the summer, the Rebbe told my Rabbi Chadikov, my father, that there's so much work in the office, so he doesn't want anybody to come along with him. But my father used to stand and hold a bag of the Pidyonis the Rebbe should read, because then they didn't make that table yet. It was still a time that they didn't do all what they didn't. They didn't furnish up the oil like they did afterwards. So he would also serve the Rebbe. He would stand for hours holding with both hands. He was to hold the bag. He says his hands were breaking. But there were a lot of things that was done for the Rebbe. But he says in Tosh Lamed Ches, it had a drastic change. And he had to do a lot of things for the Rebbe that he didn't do beforehand. And he did not elaborate because the Rebbe did not really want that people to know what's going on in the room. So he didn't tell us, and therefore I can't forward it.
No. You gave. I didn't realize that. I didn't realize that, Nakuda. That was a very important point you just made. That and you gave a solid example that he didn't wear a kapota till then, and he put it on because he was touching the Rebbe, helping him
He
to.
felt that he felt that he started to be mishamish the Rebbe in a different way. More means more of a personal way, so he felt that he has to wear kapota.
Right. And as far as you know, he was the only one of the secretaries that did that. Is that correct?
As far as I know.
Right. Okay. A technical thing. Do you know when?
I'll tell you a certain thing. Rabbi Klein came to Eretz Yisrael once, and he said when he was in the Rebbe's room, the Rebbe never asked him to give him a book. Usually, the Rebbe would go over to the shelf alone and take out a book. When I told it to my father, so my father was very surprised. He says when he's in the room, the Rebbe always asks him, give me this book, give me that book. So I think there was the Rebbe had a different relation with each secretary.
Uh-huh.
What the reason for it is, I don't know.
Right.
Usually, Rabbi Klein had his setlach that he brought in, and my father had his setlach that he brought in. Rabbi Chadikov used to go in every day by the end of the day with his setlach. He used to go in once a day. There were changes. There were years that Rabbi Chadikov used to get all the directors and all the heroes, and as Rabbi Chadikov got older, so Rebbe started to give it over to my father and to other secretaries.
Oh, really? It used to be that Rabbi Chadikov got all the answers at the end of the day.
And not the answers. You didn't hear what I said. I said the heroes. Marshal, if the Rebbe would notify that he is going to make a Fabrengen in the early 1970s, what's called surprise Fabrengen. So the Rebbe would tell my father, call Rabbi Chadikov into the room, and he would tell Rabbi Chadikov, I'm going to make a Fabrengen. Usually, it would work through Rabbi Chadikov. Later years, the Rebbe used to tell my father, as you know, that in the 80s and Shabbos, when the Rebbe used to come down to daven, my father used to stand in a certain place. And when the Rebbe walked through, the Rebbe would turn to my father and tell him, Hein Gesein Verbringen. So then that was really changes. That means as time went on, so things changed. But you have to understand that Chodikov was the most respected and highest ranking secretary. So when certain things had to be said, the Rebbe would give it over to Rabbi Chadikov. About a Fabrengen, the Rebbe would tell Rabbi Chadikov. Other directives, the Rebbe would tell Rabbi Chadikov. Then later, as time went on, and my father got older, and Rabbi Chadikov got older, so the Rebbe started to tell my father. I don't know, he told Rabbi Klein too, but that's where things changed.
Okay. Do you happen to know, I asked you this, when your father stopped teaching at Beis Rivka, the seminary?
He stopped teaching in the seminary. I don't remember exactly what year, but he told me because there's too much work in the office, he cannot go to the seminary anymore. He doesn't have any time to go to the seminary. That's what I mean.
Right? Was it in the 80s or Lamed Ches? Was it past Lamed Ches?
I don't remember. I don't remember. I never took notice of it because it's not so important to me to know exactly what year.
I understand. I understand. What was
I want questions. I want questions more echus, more muhus, not technical questions. When that was, that's not muhus.
okay,
This year exactly, that year.
okay. Now listen. What was your father's yachas with Rabbi Mendel? With Rabbi Mendel?
He was very, very close to him. I remember him speaking a lot. And Rabbi Mendel used to relate a lot of things what the Rebbe told him privately. He would give over to my father. He would tell my father. In fact, Rabbi Mendel told my father as follows. There was once a letter that Rebbe dictated to him. And Rabbi Mendel told the Rebbe that the Chassidim will have a very difficult time understanding the point of the letter. So the Rebbe said it came time the Chassidim sollen brechen die Kopf zu verstehen a Wort von sie reden. That the Rebbe told Mendel and told my father. And my father, Mendel told me that the Rebbe used to speak to him about the other secretaries too. That means Rabbi Mendel said that the Rebbe spoke to him about my father also. In fact, he told him, if I would tell people what the Rebbe told about you, nobody would have the audacity to speak against you. That's what he told him. So, next, let's go further.
Okay, wait. Is it fair to say that Rabbi Mendel, maybe more than everyone else, because of who he was more of a friend to
Be closer to the microphone. You're sitting all the way back, and I don't hear you well. I hear an echo.
Okay, I'm asking: is it fair to say that Rabbi Mendel, because of who he was, his background, and everything else, he was more of a friend to the Rebbe than the others? A friend. I'm asking you that question.
No, not at all. The Rebbe, any secretary that worked for the previous Rebbe was dear to the Rebbe. Rabbi Chadikov was a secretary by the Frierdiker Rebbe. Rabbi Rothstein was a secretary by the Frierdiker Rebbe, and so Nissa Mendel. And since they were secretaries by the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe had a special relation to them out of respect to the previous Rebbe. So it wasn't Rabbi Mendel so much as a friend. The Rebbe had a special respect for the Maskirim from the previous Rebbe because they worked by the Frierdiker Rebbe. So, and actually, Rabbi Mendel was a chassid. By the Frierdiker Rebbe, he was a secretary. He was without a beard. He actually was a secretary doing his work. And as time on, he was by the Rebbe, he became a chassid. He became more and more chassid. He started to grow a beard. And he used to come to the Rebbe's Fabrengens. And he really felt that he's a chassid of the Rebbe. So I don't think that he felt that he was a friend of the Rebbe. But this, what the Rebbe related to him very closely, as I said before, because the Rebbe respected those secretaries that were secretaries by the previous Rebbe.
Okay. Now I want to talk about, ask you if you'll be willing to talk a little bit about the difficult time from 1992 to 1994. What did you see in your father? Were there changes? Could you talk a little bit about this?
First of all, like all of Lubavitch Chassidim were very broken and frustrated of what happened. That the Rebbe suffered a stroke. And they had a very, I want to tell you even furthermore, even in 1978, Toshlan Ches, when the Rebbe had a heart attack, and I was there in New York, I remember my father went through a very difficult time. He was like very tense. Even when he came home after the Shchedesh Kislev, any phone call in the middle of the night, he would jump because they were so tense about the Rebbe. Because the doctors were the whole time under depression that the Rebbe's situation is in a very difficult situation. The same goes in Tafshin and Beis and Tafshin and Gimel, Tafshin and Dalet. Now, their problem was that people still wanted and very much wanted to have connection with the Rebbe and getting answers from the Rebbe. And the Rebbe agreed to that. So that's why they used to read to the Rebbe the questions, and the Rebbe used to make what he said, yes or no, yes or no. We all know the famous story what happened in Miami with the weather warning, and it's a famous story. So a
Yeah.
lot of these stories happen. And as once Mashpia told me something very interesting, Rabbi Alporovich from Kiryat Gat, Mashpia in Kiryat Gat, there were people that doubted the Rebbe's answers. They said, we don't know the Rebbe's mind is so clear after the stroke because they never heard the Rebbe talking. So how could we rely on the answers? So he said, very simple. Just before Chav Zayin Eder, right before Chav Zayin Oder, when the Rebbe answered, do you think the Rebbe answered um, because he understood so, or he answered because he saw Lamailo, he saw the answers the way it's supposed to answer from heaven? And that did not change from before Chav Zayin to after Chav Zayin Oder. And we actually know that there were a lot of answers from the Rebbe after Chav Zayin Oder that were exact and that were. But what they try to do is to keep the olam to have a shaykhs with all the answers. Now, one of the things they didn't want, the secretaries, the people to see the Rebbe in such a situation. Because in the first months, and was very, very difficult after we saw the Rebbe the way the Rebbe was, and then to see the Rebbe the way the Rebbe is confined to a wheelchair, the Rebbe is confined, the Rebbe can't walk, and it was actually on Shavuos on Tafshin Nun Beis. People after Talucha begged to take out the Rebbe. They took out the Rebbe with a wheelchair. And the people that saw the Rebbe regretted that they saw the Rebbe in such a situation. So there was a lot of friction between the secretaries and the Olam because the Olam wanted to have more connection with the Rebbe. And the only connection you had is through asking questions and answers. And if you understand, they brought the biggest doctors, and they brought physiotherapists, and they brought all that. But I don't really want to go into that. But it was I remember that they spent a lot of time with the doctors, and Marshal the Rebbe had a minhag that every Motzei Shabbos the Rebbe would wash, because according to halacha you're supposed to have a suda. Even though other times the Rebbe wasn't makpid on not a malav malka, let's say Shabbos by day, there were times the Rebbe wouldn't wash, as we know by the Fabrengen, the Rebbe Fabrengen would go on, but malav malka the Rebbe. And the Rebbe was consistent about this after the stroke too. I was once standing at 770 while the doctors were talking to my father, and my father was trying to show them how the Rebbe is consistent. It's not, even though the Rebbe can't speak, but we see the Rebbe is really, really aware of everything that's going on and knows everything that's going on, and he's consistent of everything. So it was a very, very difficult time, but I don't want to elaborate about it because you have to understand another thing. The Lubavitch Chassidim were very frustrated about it. And they did not know, and some rumors came out that because of this and because of that, there were rumors that the stroke happened because the Rebbe stopped taking aspirin, and they blamed my father for it. And actually, they said that my father forced the Rebbe to stop taking aspirin. Well, it's ridiculous. If anybody stopped it with the doctors, and you have to understand that the Rebbe was no such a thing. You tell the Rebbe, we came along and said you should do like this and do like that. The Rebbe was in control especially before Chav Zayin, that the Rebbe was in control of everything. And if the doctors told the Rebbe they have to stop aspirin, so they knew what they're doing. Now we know there was another Chassid, Rabbi Tenenbaum, that took aspirin. When he had the stroke, he had he was in a coma all his life. So the doctors told my father later that aspirin, since it's a blood thinner, if the Rebbe would have had the stroke while he's taking aspirin, so the first 2 years would have been a mess. And this, where the Rebbe stopped taking aspirin, did not cause the aspirin did not cause that the Rebbe should lose it completely. So there was a lot of frustration, and I don't want to go back to it. And the Rebbe was also not happy because he couldn't explain himself. You had to ask so many times, yes or no, yes or no, and the Rebbe would shake his head, yes or shake no. And it was a very, very difficult time. But I don't want to elaborate about it.
Okay.
And
We've said enough. We've said enough on that. Just one more point, and we have about a minute left, a minute and a half. What did you see in your father after Gimel Tammuz?
when I saw my father, what we saw in all of our Chassidim, first of all, when Gimel Tammuz happened, everybody was lost. Nobody believed that'll happen. Everybody believed that the Rebbe will come back the way it is. Everybody was lost. And after a while, all the Mashpim decided we have to continue. The Rebbe is with us. And so my father went along with that too. That the
Well,
Rebbe was with us.
I saw in your father a lot of strength. If I bring in Borough Park, if I bring all over your father, wherever they asked him to come, if he had the koyach, he was there, and he would share
Okay,
miracle stories.
that,
He was
that,
very
that,
strong.
that's a different question. Excuse me, that's a different question. You asked him what he felt like. He felt that he has to spread the Rebbe's words, tell the Rebbe's stories wherever he can. When he's to come to Eretz Yisrael, he fabring day and night everywhere. And he just went on with that because he felt that the people have to still feel a contact with the Rebbe. And this is what everybody decided, that the Rebbe is with us and we have to go along. And he made a point to go 3 times a week to the oil. The reason for that is because a lot of people still used to give him tzetlach because they said that before Gimel Tammuz, they gave tzetlach the Rebbe through him. So they didn't want to break the tradition. They wanted to continue to have a connection to the Rebbe to give tzetlach to the oil. So he used to have a different phone call.
Yes, we're almost.
And
Yeah,
I have to cut it short now.
yeah.
So,
You got
anyways,
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
so I just tell you one story. They invited him once to Nachos HaChabad to Fabring um, the 30 years of Nachle. And he came. So as in the plane, he fell asleep. And suddenly he sees the Rebbe in his sleep, and the Rebbe tells him, Du sollst verbringen stark. And he woke up, and Taka was a very strong verbringen. And he said it was several times that the Rebbe told him certain things in his dream. But whenever he told people what the Rebbe told him, so the Rebbe stopped coming. So since then, he never told anybody, but he said he had very interesting